Hello friends, welcome to the point. In today's session, let's discuss about the civil disobedience movement. The run up to the civil disobedience movement. So it was at the Calcutta session of the Congress in December 1928 that the Nehru report it was approved by the younger elements, which was led by Jawaharlal Nehru. Subhash Chandra Bose and Satyamurthy they expressed their dissatisfaction with dominion status as a goal of Congress. And instead of that, Bose and Satyamurthy they demanded that the Congress should adopt a Purna Swaraj or a complete independence as its goal. And the other leaders like Gandhi and Motilal Nehru they wished that the dominion status demand should not be dropped in the haste. And as a consensus over it, they had been developed with a great difficulty over the years, and they suggested that 2-year grace period should be given to the government to accept the demand of the dominion status. And later, under the pressure from the younger elements, this period it was reduced to 1 year. And now the Congress decided that if the government did not accept a constitution based on dominion status by end of the year, the Congress would not only demand complete independence but it would also launch a civil disobedience movement to attain its goal. So, political activity during 1929. Gandhi traveled constantly during 1929, preparing people for different political actions, telling the youth to prepare for the fiery ordeal, and helping the youths to organize constructive work in the villages and redressing specific grievances on the lines of Bardoli agitations and so on. The Congress Working Committee it organized a foreign cloth boycott committee to propagate an aggressive program of boycotting foreign cloth and public burning of foreign cloth. And Gandhi he initiated a campaign in March 1929 in Calcutta, and for this Gandhiji was arrested, and this was followed by bonfires of foreign clothes all over the country. Other developments that kept the political temperature high during 1929 was Meerut conspiracy case and the bomb explosion of Central Legislative Assembly and many other things. Irwin's Declaration, October 31st, 1929. So before the Simon Commission report it came out, the declaration by the Lord Irwin it was made, and it was combined with the effort of Labour government and a conservative viceroy. The purpose behind Irwin's declaration was to restore faith in ultimate purpose of British policy, and the declaration was made in the form of official communique in the Indian Gazette on October 31st, 1929. And in the declaration it is said that in view of the doubts which have been expressed both in Great Britain as well as in India regarding the interpretations to be placed on the intentions of British government in enacting the Statute of 1919, I am authorized on behalf of His Majesty's government to state clearly that in their judgment it is implicit in the Declaration of 1917 that the natural issue of Indian constitutional progress as they contemplated is the attainment of dominion status. So this was Irwin's declaration, and there was a no time scale for this, and the dominion status it promised by Irwin it would not be available for a long time to come, and there was in reality nothing new or revolutionary in the declaration. And Lord Irwin he also promised a round table conference after the Simon Commission submitted its report. Next comes Delhi Manifesto. So on November 2nd, 1929, a conference of prominent national leaders issued a Delhi Manifesto, which put forward certain conditions for attending the round table conference. So the conditions were that the purpose of the round table conference, it should not be to determine whether or when dominion status was to be reached, but to formulate a constitution for implementation of the dominion status, and the basis of principle of dominion status should be immediately accepted, and that the Congress should have a majority representation at the conference, and there should be a general amnesty for political prisoners and a policy of conciliation. Gandhi, along with Motilal Nehru and other political leaders, he met Lord Irwin in December 1929, and after the Viceroy had narrowly escaped after a bomb was detonated, meaning uh, to hit the train he was traveling in, and they asked the Viceroy for assurance that the purpose of the round table conference, it was to draft a constitutional scheme for a dominion status, and that was not the purpose of the conference, said Irwin. And then Viceroy Irwin, he rejected the demands that was put forward in Delhi Manifesto, and the stage for confrontation, it was to begin now. Lahore Congress and Purna Swaraj. So Jawaharlal Nehru, so he had done more than anyone else to popularize the concept of Purna Swaraj, and he was nominated as the president for Lahore session of the Congress on December 1929, and mainly due to Gandhi's backing, 15 out of 18 provincial Congress committees, it has opposed the nation, and Nehru was chosen because of the oppositeness of the occasion and the Congress acceptance of complete independence as its goal, and also to acknowledge the upsurge of youth that had made the anti-Simon campaign a huge success. And Nehru, he declared in his presidential address that we have now an open conspiracy to free this country from foreign rule, and you comrades and all other countrymen and countrywomen are invited to join it. The major decisions were taken at the Lahore session. The round table conference was to be boycotted, and complete independence was declared as the aim of the Congress. And Congress Working Committee, it was authorized to launch a program of civil disobedience, including non-payment of taxes, and all members of legislatures, it were asked to resign their seats. On January 26, 1930 was fixed as the first independence, which means a Swarajya Day, to celebrate everywhere. And on December 31st, 1929, at midnight, on the banks of River Ravi, the newly adopted tricolor flag of the freedom was hoisted by Jawaharlal Nehru with the slogan Inquilab Zindabad. January 26, 1930, the Independence Day pledge. So public meetings, it was organized all over the country, and villages and the towns, and the independence pledge, it was read out in local languages, and the national flag was also hoisted, and the pledge, which was supposed to have been drafted by Gandhi, it had certain points, and those points were: it is the inalienable right of Indians to have a freedom, and the British government in India, it has not only deprived us of freedom but also exploited us, but it has also ruined us economically as well as politically, culturally as well as spiritually. And India, it must therefore serve the British connection and attain Purna Swaraj or a complete independence. So we are being economically ruined by high revenue, destruction of village industries with no substitutions made. And while customs and currency and exchange rate they are manipulated to our disadvantages, and no real political powers were given, and rights of free association it was denied for us, and all administrative talent it was killed. And culturally, the system of education it has torn us from our moorings, and spiritually, compulsory disarmament it has made us unmanly. So we hold it a crime against man and God to submit any longer to British rule. So we will prepare for complete independence by withdrawing as far as possible and all voluntary association from the British government, and will prepare for civil disobedience through non-payment of taxes. And by this, an end of this inhuman rule is assured. So we'll carry out the Congress instruction for purpose of establishing Purna Swaraj. Civil disobedience movement. So at this point, the civil disobedient movement was the Salt Satyagraha and other upsurges. Gandhi had 11 demands. So to carry forward a mandate given by the Lahore Congress, Gandhi presented 11 demands to the government and gave an ultimatum of January 31st, 1930 to accept or reject these demands. And the demands were issues of general interest. It contained 6 points: reduce expenditure on army and civil services by 50%, and introduce total prohibition, carry out reforms in criminal investigation department, and change Arms Act allowing popular control of issues of firearm licenses, release political prisoners, and accept postal reservation bill. Specific Borges demands, and it had 3 points: reduce rupee sterling exchange ratio 1:4D, and introduce textile protection, and reserve coastal shipping for Indians. And specific peace and demands were of 2 points: to reduce a land revenue by 50% and to abolish a salt tax and government's salt monopoly. So, with no positive response which was forthcoming from the government on this demands, the Congress Working Committee it invested Gandhi with full power to launch a civil disobedience movement at a time and a place of his own choice. But by February end, Gandhi decided to make salt as the central formula for the movement. So why the salt was chosen as an important theme means Gandhi said there is no other article like salt outside water by taxing which the government can reach the starving millions. So the sick, the maimed, and the utterly helpless. So it is the most inhuman poll tax the ingenuity of man can devise. So salt in a flash linked the ideal of Swaraj with the most concrete and universal grievance of rural poor. So salt afforded a very small but psychologically an important income like Khadi for the poor through self-help groups and all those things. So like Khadi, again it offered to urban popularize the opportunity of a symbolic identification with the mass suffering. So that is the reason why salt was chosen as an important theme for civil disobedience movement. Dandi March. So this was held on March 12th to April 6th of the year 1930. So on March 2nd, 1930, Gandhi he informed the Viceroy of his plan of action, and according to this plan, Gandhi along with a band of 78 members of Sabarmati Ashram, he was about to march from his headquarters in Ahmedabad through the village of Gujarat, which was about 240 miles. And on reaching the coast at Dundee, the salt law was to be violated by collecting salt from the beach. And even before the proposed march began, thousands thronged to the ashram. And Gandhi he gave a certain directions for the future action, and those directions were wherever possible civil disobedience of the salt law it should be started, and foreign liquor and cloth shops it should be picketed. So we can refuse to pay tax if we have the requisite strength. Lawyers can also give up the practice, and public they can boycott law courts by refraining from litigation, and government servants they can resign from their post. And all this it should be subject to one condition, that is truth and non-violence was a condition, because it was a means to attain Swaraj, and it should be faithfully adhered to, and local leaders should be obeyed after the Gandhi's arrest. This historic march was marking the launch of civil disobedience movement, which began on March 12th, and Gandhi he broke the salt law by picking up a lump of salt at Dundee on April 6th. The violation of the law it was seen as a symbol of Indian people's resolve not to live under the British made laws, and therefore under the British rule also. And Gandhi he openly asked the people to make salt from the seawater in their homes itself and to violate the salt law. And the march, its progress and its impact on the people, it was well covered up by the newspapers. And in Gujarat, nearly about 300 village officials they resigned in answer to Gandhi's appeal. And Congress workers they engaged themselves at a grassroots level and organizational tasks also. Spread of the Saltla disobedience. So once the way was cleared by Gandhi's ritual at Dundee, defiance of the salt laws started all over the country. Nehru was arrested in April 30 for the defiance of the salt law, and it evoked a huge demonstration in Madras, Calcutta, and Karachi. And Gandhi was arrested on May 4th, 1930, when he had announced that he would lead to ride on Dharasana salt works on west coast. And Gandhiji's arrest it was followed by a massive protest in Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, and in Sholapur also. And the responses it was most fierce. And the Gandhi's arrest, the CWC, it sanctioned non-payment of revenue in Roitwari areas. No Chaukidara tax campaign in Zamindari areas, and violation of forest laws in the central provinces. So Satyagraha it was held at different places also, and the places in Tamil Nadu, Malabar, Andhra region, Orissa, Bihar, Bengal, and so many places. Satyagraha took place. Impact of agitation. So imports of the foreign cloth and other items it fell, and the government suffered a huge loss of income from liquor, excise, and land revenue. And elections to legislative assemblies it was largely boycotted. This was the impact of civil disobedience movement. Gandhi-Irwin Pact. So on Jan 25th, 1931, Gandhi and other members of the Congress Working Committee they were released, and the Congress Working Committee it authorized Gandhi to initiate a discussion with Viceroy, and as a result of this discussion a pact it was signed between Viceroy that represents the British Indian government and Gandhi represents the Indian people in Delhi on February 14th, 1931. And this Delhi Pact, it was also known as Gandhi-Irwin Pact. This placed the Congress on an equal footing with the government. Irwin, on behalf of the government, it agreed on immediate release of all the political prisoners and remission of all the fines. It should not be collected further in the future, and return of all the lands it should be returned, and it should not be sold to the third parties, and lenient treatment to those government servants who has resigned, and right to make salt in coastal villages for personal consumption and not for sale, right to peaceful and non-aggressive picketing, and to withdraw of emergency ordinances. But Viceroy Irwin, he turned down two Gandhi's demands, and those demands were public injury in police excesses and commutation of Bhagat Singh and his comrades' death sentence to life sentence. So Gandhi, on behalf of Congress, he agreed to suspend the civil disobedience movement and to participate in the next roundtable conference on constitutional question around the three linchpins of federation, Indian responsibility, and reservations and safeguards that may be necessary in India's interest. Karachi Congress Session 1931. So in March 1931, a special session of Congress, it was held at Karachi to endorse the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, and 6 days before this session, Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev and Rajguru, they were executed. And throughout Gandhi's route to Karachi, he was greeted with black flag demonstrations by the Punjab Naujawan Bharat Sabha in the protest against his failure to secure commutation of death sentence for Bhagat and his comrades. And the Congress resolutions at Karachi, so while disapproving of and disassociating itself from political violence, the Congress, it admired the bravery and a sacrifice of three martyrs. And the Delhi Pact, or which is also known as Gandhi-Irwin Pact, was endorsed, and the goal of Purna Swaraj, it was reiterated, and the two resolutions were adopted, one on fundamental rights and the other on national economic program. This made the session particularly memorable. And the resolutions on the fundamental rights, it guaranteed for freedom of speech and press, right to form associations, right to assemble, universal franchise, equal legal rights irrespective of caste, creed and sex, neutrality of state in religious matters, free and compulsory primary education, and protection to culture, language, script of minorities and linguistic groups. The resolution on National Economic Program. A substantial reduction in rent and revenue in the case of landholders and peasants, it was included in resolution on National Economic Program. And various factors like exemption from rent and uneconomic holdings, and relief from agricultural indebtedness, and control of usury, and better conditions of work, including a protection for women workers in industrial areas, and it also included a living wages, and also it included limited hours for the work, and the right to workers and peasants to form unions, and state ownership and control of key industries, mines, and also a means of transport. And this was the first time the Congress spelled out what Swaraj was, and it would mean for the masses. So, in order to end on exploitation of masses, political freedom, and it must include an economic freedom of starving millions of people. The Karachi resolution, it was to remain in essence the basic political and economic program of the Congress in the later years. So in the next session, let's discuss about the round table conferences. Thank you.